A man is standing behind a door. His breathing is so shallow. You wouldn't hear it even if you were in the same room. In his hands, not a weapon, not a gun, not a knife, an axe. A carpenter's axe, borrowed yesterday, blade freshly sharpened. He is waiting for a knock, because in exactly 5 minutes, a Nazi officer is going to walk through that door for a suit fitting, and he is never going to walk back out. This is October 14th, 1943, a death camp called Sobibor, and what is about to happen has never happened before in the history of the Holocaust. 600 prisoners, no guns, no allies, no escape route, and yet 300 of them will make it to the trees before nightfall. This is how they did it. Sobibor was not famous. That was the point. Hidden deep in occupied Poland, surrounded by dense forests, buried under layers of camouflage, pine branches woven into the fences. Hedges deliberately overgrown from the outside, it looked like nothing. Maybe a farm, maybe just trees. But between March 1942 and October 1943, approximately 250,000 Jewish people were murdered here. The operation was engineered like a factory. Trains arrived. Men and women were separated, belongings confiscated, clothing removed. Then they were told, "You are going to shower now." The showers were sealed chambers. 20 minutes later, it was over. The prisoners who were kept alive, a small fraction, selected for labor. Their job was to drag the bodies out, pull the gold teeth, bury the dead in mass graves. And then, after a few months, they too would be killed, replaced by the next group. Sobibor had one rule, and it was absolute. No one leaves. In late September 1943, a cattle car arrived from Minsk. Among the prisoners who stepped off that train was a Soviet Army lieutenant named Alexander Pikchursky. He was Jewish. He'd been captured on the Eastern Front. And from the moment he walked through the gates of Sobibor, he was watching, not with fear, with the eyes of a soldier. He clocked guard rotations. He mapped blind spots. He calculated distances from the barracks to the fence, from the fence to the tree line. He was already planning. There was already a resistance cell inside the camp. A polished Jewish prisoner named Leon Feldhendler had been building it quietly for months. He knew which guard disappeared to the warehouse at 3 p.m. He knew which patrol ran 3 minutes late on the east side. But Feldhendler had a problem. He knew the when. He didn't know the how. Pikchursky knew the how. When the two men met, the first thing they asked each other was the same question.
Do you want to get out of here alive?
They had 2 weeks. 2 weeks to build a plan inside a death camp, under constant surveillance, without a single piece of paper, without raising one flicker of suspicion. The plan was elegant and brutal. Most Nazi SS officers at Sobibor had fixed daily routines. They were German, they were punctual. Their habits were predictable down to the minute. That predictability would kill them. The idea, lure each officer one by one into an isolated location. The tailor's workshop, the cobbler's shop, the carpentry room, the warehouse. Give them a reason to come. A new coat, a boot fitting, a uniform adjustment. And the moment the door closed behind them, every prisoner knew their assignment. Every prisoner knew their time window. 5 minutes. But, and this was crucial, no one knew the full plan. Pikchursky made sure of it. The more a man knows, the more his face gives away, he said. 600 prisoners, each one holding only the piece they needed. The weapons, stolen from the tool sheds, axes, hammers, screwdrivers, hidden in mattresses, under floorboards, behind wood piles. 3:55 p.m., the tailor's shop, a man named Shalom stands behind the door. He's been sewing uniforms for SS officers for 5 months. He knows their measurements by heart. He knows their schedules. He also knows that in exactly 5 minutes, SS Oberscharführer Johann Neyman, deputy commander of Sobibor, direct overseer of the gas chambers, is coming for a suit fitting. The door opens. Neyman steps in. He hangs his cap on the hook by the door. He turns his back. "Let me check the sleeve length," Shalom says. Naaman raises his arm. The axe comes down. No shout, no time. In the carpentry room, an SS guard walks in, invited to inspect a leather coat. The door closes. Seconds later, an axe. In the cobbler's shop, a guard bends to try on a boot. A hammer finds the back of his skull. In the warehouse, a screwdriver through the throat. In the laundry room, a length of cord. In the first 20 minutes, 11 SS officers were dead. Their weapons, rifles, pistols, quietly collected. It wasn't many guns, but it was enough. Then a Ukrainian guard walked past the tailor's shop. The door wasn't fully closed. He saw the blood on the floor. The alarm screamed. Pechersky heard the siren. He waited 3 seconds, then he shouted, and survivors would later struggle to describe it. Because it wasn't quite an order, and it wasn't quite a scream. The Germans are dead. Run. 600 people moved. Not in formation, not in order. Like water through a broken dam. Some ran for the main gate. Machine guns were already swinging into position. The front row went down. The people behind them stepped over the bodies and kept running. Some charged the barbed wire fences, throwing wooden planks across the wire to climb over. The barbs caught clothes, caught skin. Some people hung there. The ones behind pushed them aside and climbed. Some ran directly onto landmines. The explosions, the screaming, the rain that started falling, cold, thin, October rain. Nobody stopped. A 16-year-old boy named Yehuda Lerner ran until his legs stopped working. He later recalled, "I ran until I couldn't run anymore, and then I lay down on the ground and I slept." By the time darkness fell over the polished forest, 300 people had made it through the fence. The other 300 were still inside. The next morning, they were all executed. The Nazis were furious in a way they had never been before. Himmler, head of the entire SS, personally ordered the manhunt. For 7 days, the forest was sealed. Search parties moved through the trees. Most escapees were caught and shot on sight. Some were betrayed by local villagers. Others died of exposure, of starvation, of wounds they'd carried through the fence. Of the 300 who made it out, fewer than 50 survived to see the end of the war. Leon Feldhendler, the man who had built a resistance from nothing, who had spent a year memorizing guard schedules in secret, survived the escape, survived the manhunt, survived the war. He was killed by anti-Semitic attackers in Poland in 1945, 3 months after liberation. Alexander Pechersky returned to the Soviet Union. For years, he was treated with suspicion. A POW who had survived was automatically considered a possible collaborator. Eventually, he was recognized as a hero. He spent the rest of his life telling the story of Sobibor. The Nazis, for their part, did what they always did with evidence. They demolished the camp, bulldozed the gas chambers, dug up the mass graves, burned the remains, buried them again, planted trees over everything, installed a Ukrainian farmer to maintain the cover. Just a quiet piece of farmland. Nothing to see here. But they could not demolish the people who had walked out. In 1965, 11 former SS members from Sobibor stood trial in West Germany. The witnesses who testified against them, the ones who sat in that courtroom and spoke clearly and without flinching, were the people who had run through that fence 22 years earlier. One of them was asked, "How did you survive?" He thought about it for a long time. Then he said, "That afternoon, we decided to stop waiting." Sobibor was designed to be invisible, to be efficient, to be forgotten. The people inside it were given numbers, not names. One of the survivors, Philip Bielowitz, escaped that day at 15 years old. He went to America, built a life, and in 2012, at the age of 90, he published a memoir. He called it A Promise at Sobibor. The book opens with a single line. October 14th, 1943, 4 p.m. I was standing outside the tailor's shop, waiting for a signal. He never wrote what the signal was, but he wrote something else. That was the only moment in my life I felt like a human being. Today, if you visit the site of Sobibor, you'll find an open field. some memorial stones, and the trees the Nazis planted to hide what they'd done. The trees are very tall now, but you know what's underneath them. And now so does everyone watching this.